Welcome to this webinar on Ayurveda and immunity. So immunity is obviously something that we really need to be talking about and taking seriously at this time when there's so much out there that our bodies don't know about yet and aren't prepared to defend themselves against. So Ayurveda is this beautiful science of living. It's most often called the science of life, but I've started calling it the science of living because with life, there's always living. And truly that's what it is. It's often called the sister science of yoga. And yoga provides these wonderful but esoteric practices for us to move subtle energy or to channel our subtle energy. Ayurveda, on the other hand, offers a really practical system of approaching daily life, such as how you eat and when you eat and what time you get up in the morning. So it's really practical, and it actually offers us a lot of valuable tools that are so practical, so simple in these challenging, unstable times. Ayurveda is often called the world's oldest tradition of self-care. In fact, we think of it as the original system of medicine. It has the oldest medical texts, and it is often called the father of Chinese medicine and the grandfather of modern medicine. So it developed in India, in the Indus Valley, which we now call India, in the Bronze Age, many thousands of years ago. And Ayurveda is a holistic science of medicine. So it is a science of medicine. It doesn't look a whole lot like allopathic medicine, which is the type that we primarily practice in the West today, that is also very necessary. And we have so many amazing medical practitioners in the front lines today helping our survival and supporting us. But Ayurveda is this holistic science that takes sort of an expanded view of the person. So it doesn't necessarily just look at symptoms. You could say that allopathic medicine primarily focuses on symptoms and treating symptoms. In Ayurveda, we would look at the whole person, right? So we look at the body, sure, what's going on in the body, but also the mind, emotions, consciousness, in fact, all five senses as well. So we're really looking at the whole person. The symptoms tell a story, but we always want to get to the deeper level of what's happening. In Ayurveda, we recommend, first and foremost, living in harmony with the laws of nature. So this philosophical idea that the whole universe has an order to it, a system to it that is inherent, that is innate, and that if we live in alignment with the universe, we live in alignment with the seasons, with the rhythm of a single day, that will support our health and our immunity and our well-being. When we live out of alignment with the laws of nature, we experience disease, right? And you could say that's what we're experiencing now. Ayurveda is evidence-based, so although it is very ancient, and in fact, some of the things we do in Ayurveda might seem very strange, a lot of modern scientific research and studies are supporting what we've been doing in Ayurveda for many centuries. There's not as much research as I would like, that's for sure, but there has been a lot of studies done over the years that support things that seem kind of odd to us as practitioners, as modern day practitioners. For example, the idea of eating an abundance of ghee, clarified butter, to detox your body. We would never think of that as Westerners, but there have been Ayurvedic practitioners prescribing that for many, many centuries, and modern research showing that it's actually really effective to use fat to pull fat-soluble toxins from your tissues. And then finally, the most important point of this overview of Ayurveda is that it is a prevention-oriented system. It absolutely has curative measures, but where Ayurveda really shines and it can be useful to us is in prevention. So I would say to most people, we use allopathic medicine for cures, right? We use it to develop vaccines and take out our appendixes. We use Ayurveda and other complementary alternative medicine systems for prevention. How do we get healthy enough in the first place that we can withstand disease, right? So with that in mind, let's look at this idea of disease prevention. So this, I'm moving your little faces out of the way. You might be able to move mine out of the way to see the screen, but I'll show it to you as well. So this screen has a quote from Alan Marks. He's the CEO of VPK by Maharishi Ayurveda. And he's a really wonderful practitioner. And this is a company that makes really great Ayurvedic products. when it was clear that the COVID virus was hitting and was going to be serious, he sent out a really wonderful email. And I was really attracted to this statement, that a balanced body and immune system respond in a balanced manner to any illness. An unbalanced system does not. Right? So this is our technique in Ayurveda. I'm not here to say, oh, Ayurveda can cure you of COVID, we can cure the world. What we can do is get our systems more balanced so that we're more fortified for what's to come. There's a profound adage in Ayurveda that disease is not caused by germs, bacteria, or viruses. Rather, disease is precipitated by these pathogens in a susceptible host. To the extent you can control your life and lifestyle, do not be a susceptible host. So this was a really powerful image for me, this idea that we can choose our lifestyle in such a way that we can eat, really, many of us, right, that don't have underlying conditions, we can choose to not be a susceptible host to this pathogen. So the definition of a healthy individual in Ayurveda, as I said, Ayurveda takes more of this expanded view of the person. So we're not simply looking at symptoms, right? You could say in modern terms, the definition of health is the absence of disease, right? In Ayurveda, the definition of a healthy individual, or svasta, is one whose doshas are balanced. We're not really going to dive deep into the doshas for this webinar, but know that the doshas are the three primary functions of your physiology: movement, transformation, and structure. Right? So those three functions, everything has to move. That's communication within your body. There's the cellular metabolism that's happening all the time. And then, of course, the very structure and the cohesiveness of your body. Those functions, of course, all have to be balanced for you to be healthy. The digestive fire, our Agni, is very important in Ayurveda. This idea that we're constantly digesting not only our meals, but all of our experiences, including our emotions. And in order to properly be processing everything that we're receiving and taking in, what we want to focus on is not only healthy diet and healthy experiences, but improving the digestive fire so that we are able to process those things that we take in. Our bodily tissues, called the dhatus, have to also be functioning normally. Ayurveda recognizes 7 types of bodily tissues: plasma, red blood cells, muscle tissue, fat tissue, bone marrow tissue, and then reproductive tissue. And they actually form in a sequence like that, from plasma all the way to reproductive tissue. And so that plasma is informed by your digestion and your diet. So we want to improve diet and digestion. And then we have well-formed plasma, well-formed red blood cells, well-formed muscle tissue, and so on, all the way to reproductive tissue. So all of the tissues have to be functioning normally. Our elimination processes, called malas, that's very important. So that would be excrement, urine, and sweat, the 3 malas. That's important, something we look at often in Ayurveda, is that functioning normally. When you wake up in the morning, do you go to the bathroom and have a bowel movement, right? It's that simple. Do you break a sweat daily? These things are considered very important in Ayurveda in terms of our detoxing capacity. And then we move on beyond the body into the senses, the 5 senses, the 5 streams of awareness through which we perceive the 5 elements. The mind, that's an important one. Ayurveda describes the monkey mind, and whatever is happening upstairs is always affecting what's going on downstairs. So we want a nice, stable mind. And then ultimately the big capital S self, which is called Atma, could be called consciousness, God consciousness, that this part of us that's cosmic, that is connected to the entire cosmos, not just the individual self, the ego self. All of these must be filled with bliss. And this person is a healthy person. This is from one of the earliest Ayurvedic texts called Sushruta Samhita. And I don't know about you, but when I look at that, I think, oh, we have a lot of work to do here. So this is the definition of a healthy individual in Ayurveda. And of course, one of the things that we need from a modern standpoint to be a healthy individual is to have a healthy, balanced, fortified immune system. So just looking from a modern perspective at the immune system here, what is the immune system? I mean, we know what the cardiovascular system is, right? That's the heart pumping blood around the body. We know what the renal system is, the kidneys and the urethra filtering the water in the body. The immune system is vast and complex and also kind of subtle to understand. It's a mobile circulating system that involves many different parts of the body. Essentially, and I'm making this extra simple, immune cells come from precursors in the bone marrow tissue. They develop into mature cells that can present in all different parts of the body. So I've listed a few here, such as skin, right? Of course, that's your first line of defense. So we want to have immune cells in certain layers of your skin. In your blood, of course, we've heard of T cells and white blood cells, the thymus gland in the chest. And then, of course, this is spelled incorrectly, but the lymphatic system is very important. So that includes lymph nodes and then lymph fluid, which we want to circulate around the body to promote good health. And then the spleen as well is an organ of the immune system. So the immune cells present in many different parts of the body. It's a very complex system, and it's responsible for discriminating between healthy cells, healthy tissues, and pathogens and unhealthy cells, communicating information when it finds pathogens and unhealthy cells, and then when it needs to, mobilizing a defense system, a response system that includes inflammation. So that is actually part of a healthy immune system, is the inflammation response. We just don't want to live with chronic inflammation if we can avoid it. We don't want to live in such a way that we're invoking chronic inflammation through our diet or through stress. But inflammation, when there's a pathogen, is part of the healthy immune response. We don't want to suppress it with ibuprofen, for example. And then there's many kinds of cells in the immune response, such as antigen cells and these B cells that sort of bind to pathogens and destroy them. I was reading up on all the different types of immune cells, and I was thinking of the image of like a Pac-Man. So there's that kind of image in the body of immune cells that will actually essentially eat and destroy these pathogens that show up in the body through germs, bacteria, virus, right? So it's very fascinating. There's this incredible system within you that is ready to mobilize at any time. And what we want to do is support that. So when it has to mobilize, it works efficiently, and then we return to equilibrium and a state of harmony quickly. So that's the Western look at the immune system. In Ayurveda, one of the words for immunity is a word called ojas. And ojas is this beautiful idea and concept from Ayurveda that describes the very expression of immunity, vitality, longevity, and luster of the body. So in fact, if you or someone you know has sort of a glow to them, bright, clear eyes, they're effervescent and creative, and all of those things that we associate with a healthy person, we would say in Ayurveda, ooh, that person has lots of ojas, right? Lots of ojas. There's some argument as to whether ojas is truly a substance within the body, or if it's more a reflection of good digestion, good immunity, and good health. It's possible that it's both. There's a beautiful saying in one of the ancient Ayurvedic texts that says that that ojas is located in the heart. And in fact, at birth, you receive 8 drops of ojas from your mother in your heart. And then of course, your heart circulates that ojas around the entire body. So we say ojas lives in your heart, but pervades your entire body. So you get these 8 drops at birth, right? That's the concept. And how you live from the moment that you're born until the moment that you pass, we would say you're either living in such a way that you're promoting ojas, building ojas, or depleting your ojas. I often use the image of filling up the gas tank in your car, right? You don't want to be running on empty. And you want to live in such a way that there's lots of gas in your tank. Ojas is also described as being the most refined product of our digestion and metabolism. So a couple of slides back, I mentioned this idea of a healthy person having healthy, well-formed tissues. And I described the 7 dhatus, the 7 tissues in Ayurveda. Remember, there was plasma, red blood cells, muscle tissue, fat, bone, bone marrow, and reproductive tissue. And they present in a sequence, right? And so what we would say is, if you remember, I said at the beginning of that sequence, we actually have to have good digestion, that's Agni, digestive fire, to create that good interstitial fluid, that plasma. And then from there, we get good red blood cells, and then so on, right? We get to reproductive tissue. And then after that 7th tissue, we get good ojas. So we actually have to have the full sequence of good digestion to create healthy tissues, to build ojas, immunity and vitality, and then it circles back, right? If we have good ojas, we digest our experience as well, and we build good tissues. So it's not a straight line, but a cycle or a circle. Ojas, however, becomes depleted by things such as poor diet, which we'll look at, and stress. Ojas can be built up or promoted by what's called a sattvic lifestyle. Sattva means balance, harmony, ease. And a sattvic lifestyle is one in which we live without a lot of stress, right? And a sattvic lifestyle can be supported by the 4 pillars of health. So we're going to look at the 4 pillars of health. You may have heard of these before. 4 pillars of health, at least according to Ayurveda, are diet, sleep, exercise or movement-based practices, and then stress reduction, which in Maharishi Ayurveda we would call consciousness-based practices. So let's look at those one by one and how each one in turn can help us to promote good ojas and support immunity. Diet. This one should be a no-brainer. Hopefully by now we're all understanding that diet plays a major role in your health. In fact, in Ayurveda, we would say that about 80% of all disease is rooted in digestion, even if the symptoms don't appear to be digestive in nature. So first thing we want to do is support a healthy gut microbiome. Microbiome is these trillions of bacteria that are in your body. Of course, we think of germs as being bad, but most of those bacteria are good. They're part of your system functioning normally, part of your immune system as well. So we want to support that healthy gut bacteria with warm, pleasing, and freshly prepared meals. So if you are home all day, which I assume you are, take advantage of the opportunity to freshly prepare all of your meals when often you can't, right? When you have to go into the office, it's not so easy. Freshly prepared meals carry more prana, more consciousness, more energy than meals that have been prepared days previously and frozen and then microwaved, right? So we're looking for fresh meals. Include plenty of fruits, nuts, cooked vegetables, a little easier to digest than raw vegetables, but a small salad before lunch is okay. Whole grains, all of the grains, rice, quinoa, barley, millet. And then plant-based proteins are best. Certainly, you may choose lean animal-based proteins, but we recommend those plant-based proteins like lentils, beans, peas, etc. So think about each meal, including definitely cooked vegetables, whole grains, and those plant-based proteins. And then, fruits and nuts are great for breakfast and snacks throughout the day. These are all foods that have been shown to support that healthy gut microbiome, help us to build good bacteria, and through vitamins, help to promote good vitality and immunity. So that's something that probably lots of different disciplines and philosophies would say. That may not seem like it's rocket science to you, but the use of digestive spices is a little more specific to Ayurveda, right? This idea that spices contain more of the fire element and they help to promote the digestive fire, right? So that's, if we break everything down to the elemental level, which we do in Ayurveda, we would say that your digestion is literally a fire inside of you. And we want to stoke that fire, right? Keep the digestive strong so we form good tissues and build good ojas. And digestive spices, anything that has spice is going to have some more of the fire element in it. It's going to help stoke that fire. So we recommend in particular cumin, coriander, fennel, ginger, black pepper, turmeric, and mustard as digestive spices that you can prepare your meals with. These are going to help with digestion. Each of these spices has a very specific action and effect on different parts of the physiology that's been deeply studied and written about in Ayurveda. But for now, understand it helps to stoke the digestive fire. I think that's a really beautiful way to look at it. And there have been some more recent studies that suggest that these spices support our epigenetics. So we all know that we have genetic tendencies that we receive from our ancestors. Some of us are predisposed towards certain conditions. Epigenetics describes that we can live in such a way that we support that predisposition or we suppress that predisposition. So if you have a predisposition towards obesity, you could live in a way that supports that, right? You could eat a lot of junk food and lie around on the couch all day, or you could live in such a way that suppresses it. You could eat fruits and veggies and be very active, right? And you would actually be able to suppress that genetic predisposition. So that's called epigenetics. And this modern study seems to suggest that these spices that Ayurveda has always been prescribing helps to support that epigenetic response. And then finally, sip warm water during the day. So because we think of the digestion as a fire, we don't want to distinguish or extinguish that fire with a big icy drink, right? So we recommend warm water, even hot water with slices of ginger, herbal teas. At this time, I would recommend starting the day with lemon water. So you could just squeeze some lemon in warm water first thing when you wake up. Get some vitamin C in your diet. In fact, researchers just yesterday were saying that they believe they can treat COVID-19 with vitamin C. And let's be honest, taking extra vitamin C can't hurt. So add the juice of half a lemon to your warm water in the morning. And then diet continued this time when we are mostly indoors and things feel a little unsteady and uncertain. Many of us have experienced financial loss. We want to avoid emotional eating, stress eating, right? It doesn't help anything to be snacking all day, especially on junk food, dry, crunchy food that's hard to digest. Eating a lot throughout the day actually makes it a little bit harder to digest because you're sort of constantly eating when you're not giving your system a chance to digest a meal. So I know that that's hard, but try to avoid too much emotional eating. Certainly this would be a great time to reduce things like alcohol, which we know is a depressant, caffeine, which is the opposite, a stimulant, also not helpful if your mind is very busy and active and worried and anxious. Junk food, we really want to be thinking about supporting your immune system with foods filled with prana, with energy and vitality. So not junk food. And then sugar is another item that's really been identified as really challenging the microbiome in the gut, really challenging gut health, and actually possibly interfering with the release of serotonin, like your happy hormones that are primarily released in your gut. So now would be a great time to reduce all of those things in your diet. And then not just what we eat, but how do we eat? This is so important in Ayurveda. We want to eat in a settled environment, sitting down. Turn off the news. Don't have arguments when you're eating. Chew your food, right? You want to take your time and enjoy your meal and focus on your meal so that you can digest it, because you could be eating the healthiest food in the world but not digesting it because you're watching the news right now while you're trying to eat it and you're worried and you're anxious. So settled environment, take the time, chew, and then sit for 5 or 10 minutes after each meal, right? Then after that, it's great to get up and move around. So if you can go on a neighborhood walk, we're still allowed to do that. That helps the digestion response. For sure, helps move food down through the digestive tract, but we don't want to rush up immediately after eating and start racing around and doing things. And then finally, this idea of eating with hunger. So we don't have to eat on a set schedule, although we have some guidelines for when you should eat that I'm going to share with you. What I mean by on a set schedule is, in the West, we tend to eat before work because we have to eat before we get there. and then we eat when we get a lunch break, and then we eat when we get home. And I don't know that we ever think about whether or not we're actually hungry. And hunger is your body's way of telling you it is ready to digest food. So we want to wait until we're hungry to eat a meal. You don't have to be ravenous, that would actually be too far, but hunger, so that you know your body's ready to digest. The reason I included this point in this presentation at this time is because if you find that you wake up and you're not hungry and you're not sure why, right? You had a normal day yesterday, you slept well, but you're not hungry, it's possible that your body's fighting something, right? And it's saying, hey, no, like I can't take a meal right now because I'm busy down here. And we want to listen to that. So particularly now when there's lots of pathogens around, let's make sure that we are eating with hunger. And don't be alarmed if you're not hungry, just pay attention, because your body is always telling you what's happening. We're just learning to listen. So I mentioned a moment ago, in Ayurveda, we do consider there to be better times of day to eat your meals. And it's not a set schedule. However, we recommend taking a light breakfast by about 8 a.m. So we don't want to eat breakfast too late in the morning. So if you wake up hungry, good news, nice light breakfast. Fruits are great, whole grains are great. So if you like sort of porridges and things like that. And then make lunch the main meal of your day. So that is very key to Ayurveda, a little bit different from what we tend to do in the West, is have your main meal, your biggest meal, somewhere between noon and 2, when the sun is highest in the sky and your digestive fire is strongest in your body. This would be a great time to take proteins, such as even animal-based proteins, if that's what you take, or plant-based proteins, lots of whole grains, lots of cooked veggies, right? And cooked in those spices. And then instead of having your main meal at night, eating a lighter or a medium-sized dinner, probably more important than how big your dinner is at what time. So trying to eat dinner by 7:30, earlier would be better. Again, you want to wait till you're hungry. So if you can have your lunch by 1, you still have about 6 hours, and then you could eat dinner by 7, right? And when I say lighter, I mean more digestible. So that could be a soup, right? Something that goes down nice and easy. I like to make a soup with some flatbreads often in the evening. And the reason for eating dinner earlier is so that you can digest your meal before it's time to go to sleep. And sleep is the next of the 4 pillars of health. So sleep and rest I put, because sleep and rest are 2 slightly different things and are both very important. And I think it's important for us to get both. Sleep, of course, and then conscious rest. Getting enough rest boosts immunity. We know that. Like, many of us get sick when we're not getting enough rest, right? We're staying up too late, or we're not sleeping well because we're stressed and we're overactive during the day, and then we get sick, right? It's, for me, that's always the pathway to strep throat, right? So getting enough rest boosts immunity. It also, when you're sleeping, your body has time to do all kinds of housekeeping, regulating your hormones, for example. In fact, there's been some links to the hormone regulation that happens when you're sleeping and your metabolism. So often people that find that they're not sleeping enough or sleeping well gain weight, and they're not sure why. And if we can get them to sleep better, then they regulate their hormones and they lose the weight. And it can actually start the night before by not eating dinner too late, so that you're not trying to sleep on a full belly. Getting enough rest and sleeping allows your physiology to essentially reboot, right? We want to wake up feeling refreshed in the morning. And detox. Your liver does a natural detox overnight between the hours of about 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. And we want it to do that detox. That's its job. And we are always taking in toxins from our environment, from our stress, from our diet. That just happens. It's a byproduct of life. And we want to give your liver a chance to do its job and detox your body, your blood. In order for that to happen, it's better if you're resting between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., right? Rather than being awake and being active and just asking your body to do more things than it needs to be doing. So ideal timing for bed might be a little early for some of you. We recommend getting to bed by 9:30 and then lights out by 10. So I always leave that little window in there so people feel like they can go to bed and read for a bit. But ideally lights are out by 10, because we want your liver to do its housekeeping, right? And then waking up with the sun, right? I was just checking. So here right now, the sun's rising right about 7 a.m. So that's not too traumatizing for any of us. Ideally, you would actually wake up a little bit before sunrise so you can see sunrise. You don't necessarily have to go and stand outside and watch it, although that is a beautiful thing to do. And that tells your physiology that it's time to awaken. So you can do that. But just being up and being aware of the morning light, of that transition from darkness into light, is so powerful. And like I said, it actually tells your physiology, okay, it's time for me to awaken. It's time for me to enliven. So trying to be in bed by 9:30, 10, trying to wake up with the sun. Of course, at certain times of year, if the sun was rising very early, we could certainly accommodate that. But that's the general idea. We don't all have to take the same amount of sleep. So I think when we're younger, we want like youngsters, teenagers with growing brains, developing brains to get like a good 8 hours or more. Once we get older, that may not be true for you, and you don't have to be alarmed by that. I encounter too many people in my line of work who take sleeping pills on a regular basis and have done for years because they tend to wake up at 5 or 6 a.m. And there's nothing wrong with waking up at 5 or 6 a.m., especially if you're going to bed by 9:30, you got plenty of rest. And some of us just do naturally have more interrupted sleep. If that's you, we just also want to be resting, right? So can you get to bed early and rest? And maybe you do get up earlier, but resting is very beneficial. In fact, something that I recommend are practices of conscious rest. So I've listed here Yoga Nidra, which you can find online or maybe at your local yoga studio, finding someone who will guide you in a relaxation process. And then restorative yoga, which is also Yoga Nidra, but we do different postures. They're all reclining postures, so very relaxing. I recommend practicing these regularly. These help to promote the alpha brainwave state, which is deep rest. It's associated with some types of meditation. It's the place where we're actually able to rewire our neural pathways. So it's a really powerful place to be. And I recommend if you are a person that tends to need or take naps, daytime sleep, in place of that, in Ayurveda, we don't love daytime sleep, but instead you can practice conscious rest. And I think you'll actually find that you emerge much more refreshed and revitalized. And then the third pillar of health was exercise or movement. So I think we all know movement's good for us. How and why is a different story. Movement of your body is one of the ways that we can move lymph, and that was part of the lymphatic system, which was part of your immune system. When we don't move it, like if you just sit in a chair all day, it just kind of pulls in the lower part of your body and it doesn't do as much good there. So moving your body is actually a great way to support your immune system. And then of course we know that exercise, or the right kind of exercise, can support your respiratory and cardiovascular health. And that is so important for making sure the cells and muscles of your body are nourished and being fed with enough oxygen. Keeping your lungs healthy too when we're in a respiratory crisis is important, right? That can also help. It may not help you fend off the infection, but it can help you recover faster. Exercise releases endorphins, feel-good hormones, right? Especially if it's a kind of exercise that you like, which is what you should be doing. You should be doing something that you enjoy. And a lot of us are dealing with some mental health, I don't want to say issues, but mental health moods that are different from what we typically experience, right? With all of the change and uncertainty, feeling unsettled. So again, this isn't like taking a happy pill, but it's worth getting moving every day for that endorphin rush, right? And then in terms of what we can be doing, walking outdoors is really key as long as we're allowed to do that, particularly in the morning light. Remember, again, I said there's something really powerful for you to receive directly morning light. So that's something that I recommend. Biking, if you can get away with that. So that's kind of easy on the joints, a good way to move. Yoga, we recommend for everyone in Ayurveda. The two things we recommend for everyone in Ayurveda are walking and yoga. And the great thing is now is that there's lots of yoga that you can be doing online with a teacher. So that is really helpful. You don't have to lose that part of your practice just because your yoga studio is closed. And then there's so many at-home workouts as well. There's so many resources for us right now. So making a point to move every day, but avoid depletion, right? And this is where, as Westerners, we have a hard time, because we always want to be like training for an event or beating our previous time, right? And we tend to approach exercise very competitively. And in Ayurveda, we actually would say, like, you don't want to get your heart rate up too much. You don't want to get too depleted, but you want to break a sweat and move your body and move lymph. And you want to feel like good and balanced while you're doing it. So try to avoid that really depleting exercise, because again, just like not getting enough sleep, if you deplete yourself through too much exercise, too much vigorous exercise, then you're going to compromise your immune system. And that's not what we're trying to do. And then finally, skip exercise if you are unwell. So if you start to feel ill, you get a fever, we don't want to get on the treadmill, even really do yoga. Restorative yoga would be okay, of course, because that's deep relaxation yoga, but that would be a good time. Again, when your body is activating its immune response, you want to give it as little as possible to do, right? So you don't want to eat a big meal. What do they say? Like, starve a fever, feed a cold. So if there's a fever, you don't want to eat a big meal, and you don't want to go for a run, or, you know, try and like run through it, and take rest, right? Take rest. So we skip that if you're unwell, and then we just come back to it when you're feeling well once again. All right. And then the fourth pillar of health is probably the most important one, and that is the pillar of stress reduction. The stress response, which is the sympathetic nervous system, elevates hormones like cortisol and adrenaline levels in your body, right? And that's okay, because that's part of the healthy stress response, right? We have that response for a reason. We have those hormones for a reason. And when everything's functioning normally, then we get a spike in cortisol and adrenaline when we need it. Like, for example, if you're being chased by a mountain lion, and then those levels go back down, right? So in a healthy system, we metabolize those hormones and the levels go back down. The problem is if we have elevated cortisol and adrenaline levels over time, right? Meaning you're always stressed, you're always in the stress response, and that is going to really fatigue your whole system, right? You've heard of adrenal fatigue, those glands that sit on top of your kidneys, right? They get exhausted, the whole system gets exhausted, and it fatigues your immune system. So actually, because your immune system activates that inflammation response, right? Which again is a good thing, but we want it to go away when it's finished fighting the pathogens. But when you're constantly in that state of mobilized inflammation response, it's quite exhausting for your organs, your tissues, and your immune system. The relaxation response, as it's called, is a function of the parasympathetic nervous system, which is mostly governed by a nerve called the vagus nerve that connects your brain to your gut. It's a big, big nerve, and it has many branches that reach out into the body, and it controls many functions such as digestion and respiration. The relaxation response restores physiological equilibrium and relaxation, right? So we want to have the stress response for survival, but we also want to be able to be very fluent in the language of relaxation. So we can activate our stress response if we need it, if there's a mountain lion that we need to get away from, but we can also activate the relaxation response. We don't live over there in inflammation land, right? So how do we do that? Well, this brings me to Ayurveda's beautiful concept of the 3 Mahagunas, the mental qualities. So these are 3 qualities that are specific to the mind. The first one is called Rajas, and Rajas is described as activity or passion. So anytime that you're awake, thinking, doing something, driving a car, we would say that's a Rajasic state of mind. And then its opposite, its counterpart is Tamas, and Tamas is described as inertia or destruction. And tamas is essentially when there's not a whole lot going on in your mind, like when you're asleep, for example, right? And these two can go out of balance, right? Rajas would be increased, and that would be too much activity in your mind. So anxiety or anger, general sense of worry, overthinking things, or being overly critical or competitive. All of these we would say would be like an imbalance of rajas, too much rajas in your mind. So many people are experiencing that right now, right? And then the opposite, tamas, inertia. We need that so we can go to sleep. We have to stop thinking at some point. However, it can become actually destructive, right? We can have too much tamas, right? Or it's too tamasic. And that would describe states of depression, right? Sluggishness in your mind, feeling unmotivated or uninspired. That's called tamas. So what we are seeking in Ayurveda is a state of sattva, that sense of balance, awareness, and harmony. And the good thing is that sattva can never become imbalanced, right? Because it is balanced. That's what it means. Rajas can become imbalanced. Tamas can become imbalanced. In times like these, that's common, right? A lot of people are describing feeling really mentally anxious or depressed. And we want to get you to a state of sattva balance. Why? Because the upstairs and the downstairs are always talking to each other. Whatever's happening in your mind is signaling to your nervous system, and it's signaling to your whole physiology to release certain hormones in response. So if you're very anxious, then your mind is telling your nervous system that you're in danger. And then your body is releasing adrenaline and cortisol, right? So we don't want that. We don't want that. We want to use some great tools so that we can get ourselves back to a state of sattva. Mind is balanced, the nervous system settles, and the whole physiology is balanced. And that supports ojas, or immunity. So how do we get more of a sattvic mind? Good question, right? In these times, actually, all of the things that we've talked about so far, like having a balanced diet, actually does impact your mind. Oftentimes I work with people who are having a lot of mental agitation, and then when we look at their diet, they're eating a lot of like really spicy foods and drinking alcohol. And when we take that away, they find that not only does their body recover from like inflammation, but the mind settles as well. And then of course, getting enough sleep supports a sattvic mind, so diet and sleep. And then there's some also wonderful behavioral recommendations from Ayurveda, such as staying free of anger and worry. I know it's easier said than done, but it's important to put our focus on that, right? We don't want to find ourselves in the grip of anger or worry. You know, worry is a thing for either the past or the future. In the present, there's no worry, right? And inviting yourself to, of course, only do what you can, being responsible for your own actions and knowing that there's things that you have to let flow over you like a river, flow by. Really good for your mental and heart health, right? So we think in Ayurveda of having sort of your physical heart and then your emotional heart that's actually connected to your mind. And we support that by staying free of anger, staying free of worry. Those emotions don't serve us, right? They don't serve our physiology or our hearts. Speaking the truth, this is one that comes up in Ayurveda and many other traditions as well, Ayurveda and yoga and many religions too. And actually in Maharishi Ayurveda, we often say, speak the sweet truth, right? So we want to speak the truth, but we want to do that with kindness. We never want to cause anyone harm with our words. Like that's, you know, a big thing is like, well, it was true. What I said was true, but we don't want to cause anyone harm and hurt them. And that never feels good for us too, right? Sometimes we speak out of turn and then it doesn't feel so good. And keeping the company of the wise. So surrounding yourself with like-minded people. I know it's difficult to surround yourself with people right now, but we can do things like this. We can engage and connect online and engage with our teachers, right? But more important, I think, is making sure that the people that you're surrounded with and in communication with on some level share your values and your goals so that they're supportive of your journey. Limit exposure to the news. It's good to stay informed, right? And it's good to know what's happening since things are changing so rapidly. You don't have to be watching a 24-hour news cycle. It's not changing that rapidly and it's not good for our health. So I would say that is something that causes a lot of stress and anxiety for people, is just constantly checking the news, constantly checking their phones. And we want to limit how much information we're allowing into our nervous system, because everything is signaling to your nervous system, okay, this is happening, you're in danger, I need adrenaline. And we don't need adrenaline right now. Take lots of breaks from screen time. So I don't know about you, but I am spending a lot more time on my computer because everything's online now. So I have to be really mindful, set alarms, get up and go outside for a walk. Even earlier, I just went down to the post box. I wasn't expecting a letter, but just something to keep taking breaks and get off the screen. And certainly I've been telling people I have a hard and fast deadline at the end of the day where typically by 5 p.m. I don't want to be on my computer working anymore. And depending on what you do, you'll have to come up with your own deadline, make sure you're taking breaks, and then spending quality time with people you love is always good for your overall health and therefore your immunity. So hopefully you live with people that you love and you can use this time to do things that you wouldn't usually do. You don't have to zone out over Netflix all the time. You can play games, you can talk. We actually have had a couple of just Zoom hangouts with friends in the last couple of weeks, like friends in Kansas City, that we wouldn't usually do that. And there's no reason not to. And it was so lovely and just felt really, really heartwarming, right? So even if it's not physical time, we can still have quality time. And then this is a big one. So to promote sattvic mind and support the whole infrastructure of body, mind, consciousness, practicing daily meditation. There's so many really wonderful studies on the effects of meditation and everything from reducing stress to reversing heart disease to helping people to quit smoking. It improves everything from digestion to sleep, particularly if you can find a style of meditation that helps to activate those alpha brain waves. There's many different ways to meditate, but taking that time once or twice a day, I like 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. personally for up to 20 minutes to sit in stillness, in relative silence, and try to let everything settle down. So powerful. And then pranayama, right? The breathing techniques that come from not Ayurveda so much, but from yoga. These are really powerful. And we're only just starting to understand the connection between your breath and the vagus nerve, which governs your parasympathetic nervous system, which we often call the relaxation response. So my recommendation for pranayama, there's countless techniques. Many of them are quite vigorous and not particularly stress reducing. But one that we've found that actually modern studies suggest is the most soothing, if you like, for your vagus nerve is just to inhale for 5 seconds and exhale for 5 seconds, just like that. It's always good to do these seated or lying down with your eyes closed. It doesn't have to be exact, but you just sort of inhale and count to 5 and exhale and count to 5, and you can do 10 to 20 rounds and then just relax. And that has been really found to help vagus nerve tone, which helps parasympathetic nervous system, relaxation response, which supports immunity. So we have all these different angles, right? From diet to sleep to exercise to our behavior, the way we interact with other people, all the way down to the way that we breathe to help support the immune response. So here's kind of the wholeness of what we've been talking about, or if you like, the summary, the conclusion. Remember that a balanced immune system responds in a balanced way, right? So while we may not be able to completely protect ourselves from COVID-19, you may already have had an experience with it, you can support your immune system so that when you are exposed, your immune system responds with, the inflammation response, that's the fever for a day or two, and then hopefully you're healing and you're getting back on your feet, right? That's what we're hoping for. We attain balanced immunity by taking a balanced approach to body, mind, and consciousness. So body is diet, digestion, daily rhythm, and sleep. Mind with meditation and pranayama and the way we interact with other people. And then consciousness too with meditation, bringing awareness to all of our activities. And finally, balanced living promotes ojas, the ultimate defense against disease. All right. So I'll stop my share and I'm going to unmute you in case you have questions, because we still have a few minutes if you have any questions about that material. Anything jump out at you that you want to ask me about? No? All right.
Yeah, I don't really have any questions.
That's all right.
Yeah, loved the presentation though.
Was it useful?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Good.
I know I've been doing the cleanse with you already. I've been learning a lot about um, the entire Ayurvedic kind of principles and stuff, but this definitely went into more depth, which was nice.
Good, good.